We don't just attract who we are, because you've heard about the law of attraction and that we attract who we are, not so much what we want. But I believe that we attract people, things that see your goodness, your good ground, your good soil, your nutritious soil, things that you're doing to yourself daily, and they want a part of that. The reason why? Because that's who they naturally are, but somehow they've lost that concept. They've lost their reality of what their identity is. That we all are seeds that have been sown into the earthly ground. And within each one of us is an inner garden that we are to cultivate, to take care of, to assess, to replant spiritual seeds, to go along with the seasons, the law of growth, the different seasons, spring, winter, summer, where there's a time for germination and hibernation, and how we in the springtime we grow and we blossom, and in the summertime how we light up the world with our different colors and who we are, and fall when we bring about the harvest, the fruit of our work, the fruit of our character. There's so much that's going on in the world today. And if you've been listening to Create a Generational Love Cycle, I've discussed many concepts on this podcast. And my thoughts are, instead of naming this podcast "Break the Cycle of Pain," it's focused on what it is that I want to do. What's the goal? What's the positive side of it? Because if you starve the opposition and feed what you really want to happen in life, nurture it, your goals, your desires, what you believe the world should be instead of what you're seeing, then you're going to see the reality or the fruition or the harvest of your ideas, your goals, your desires. And so today is the 8th of January. This is my first time getting back here on Create a Generational Love Cycle. And I spent some time talking about the seeds we plant, which is on Wednesdays. And I also have another segment where I talk about healing from the inside out, how to really get that sustainable healing, not the kind that, external bandages and you put them on, whatever that may be, and they fall off, but the kind that really you blossom from the inside out, despite your upbringing, despite your background, despite your circumstances. And we all have our growth processes when we're talking about planting seeds, when we're talking about healing, and we're talking about creating that generational cycle of love. We all have things that we encounter throughout life. However, it was not meant for us to bring us down. It was not meant, our experiences are not meant to make us bitter, but to actually to reflect the nature of ourselves, the spiritual nature of ourselves, and that we can overcome or transcend any experience. How the creator of us are indifferent. I was just thinking about this as I was coming in from outside from walking around in our neighbor, actually in front of the house. I envision a track no matter where I go. And so I have this, we live in a cul-de-sac, and that's like a track that I will use to walk, my children to walk. And I was coming in and just thinking about, our lives, and thinking about how we are here to reflect the truth that our creator is in different uniforms, grew up in different cultures and different religions and different socioeconomic statuses, and uh, different backgrounds as far as education and history and family history and costumes, the human costumes that we're wearing, the black, the brown, the light complected, all the different colors that you see that we have is all a reflection of his diversity, of and I shouldn't even say his, of its diversity. That there's no division. If you can create so many different plants or so many different houses, so many different colors of people and different personalities, then that's just You love that. You love the family. You love the variety. You love seeing yourself in different forms of expression. How wonderful is that when we change the perception of what we believe, the traditional thoughts, the thoughts that are have been divisiveness, and we change that and we have a bigger perspective about life, that it's not just about colors and races and cultures and just personalities, but it's more about the unity that we all share, this spiritual divinity that is within us. And so I see our inside as an inner garden. And it took some time for me to see that. This is a child growing up that saw things and experienced things and was like, okay, this is not how life is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a struggle. And just throughout my different growth periods, childhood, adolescent, what you go through too as well, there is supposed to be a spiritual evolving, right? Where we're evolving not just to create something good in the world, but of being our true nature, our true selves, right? And so I believe that as we do that, our personalities, they are to align with our spiritual nature. And so we have this inner garden, this peaceful abode, these spiritual truths, kindness, goodness that are all inside of us. But it's when we allow our experiences to to redirect us, to redirect our growth. When we allow weeds to come into our inner garden, and when I say weeds, and I'm working on this book, Cultivate Your Inner Garden, um, your heart and mind for an abundant harvest. Cultivate your heart and mind for abundant harvest. It's about, first of all, knowing your identity and knowing that within you is everything you need to succeed. Now, it's easy to say, and maybe it didn't sound so easy just a few minutes ago, but when you really look at the bigger picture and don't focus on the things that are going on, and realize that no matter what is happening around me, I still am who I am, right? I still have this spiritual um, nature, this essence of me. And we have these seeds, these virtues of our creator. For a long time, I called it God. I've called it infinite intelligence. In my book, I address it as the master gardener, and the seeds, we are its seeds that have been sown into earth. And so when we think about that, we have everything we need inside of a seed, right? A seed knows what it's going to be. It's going to be a tree, it's going to be a wildflower, it's whatever it is it's going to be, that's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to represent here on earth. And it has this spiritual blueprint, right? Of how it's supposed to grow, its limbs, the color, the shape, and everything it needs to do what it needs to do, be that it's in the environment. The environment will help it to become what it is destined to be. And I do believe that even in the worst environments, we can still grow, especially if you believe that you can grow. It is our job as the seed, then as the tenderer of our garden, and eventually the master, that we continually to assess our garden. And I mentioned weeds. Weeds are seeds. We have seeds. We have our spiritual seeds. And then we have weeds. If you've ever seen them, one day I was out and my garden was very productive. New house. And within a year, that year, I mean, I had zucchini growing like it was nobody's business. And it rained, it was sun and rain, just a combination of really good environment. And when I went out one day, I just noticed something. It looked so pretty. And I was like, oh my gosh, is that a plant that's growing? One of my, one of my peppers that's growing. I was growing green peppers, yellow peppers, red peppers. And I looked closer and I got down really close to like the root where it was coming out of the ground, sprouting out of the ground. And I saw a little vine wrapped around this other plant. And it took me a moment and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's a weed." And I'm as this novice gardener, and how weeds can really, they seek good environments and they want to grow in that environment. And weeds attract more weeds. And you have to continually assess and see, are they robbing you of your spiritual fruits, of your natural virtues that you have? And weeds are like those negative emotions, consistent negative emotions: fear, anger, hatred, resentment, shame, guilt. And how, as long as you consistently provide that environment that you're feeling that way about yourself, that you believe there's no other way but to be angry, that you allow your emotions and your feelings to guide you, to direct you, to allow them to come into your inner garden and to grow, the more and more you're going to attract those like minded weeds and others, the more you're going to attract those weeds. So if it's anger weeds, you're going to attract more anger weeds. And anger tend to attract more weeds. What are those? Resentment, right? Rage, vengeance. That there is a process for our emotions. They go up a ladder, just like, often the root of many of the feelings, emotions that we have is fear. Fear of not being good enough, fear of being an imposter, fear of failure, fear of um, succeeding. What will people say about us? And so we can allow those weeds to come in and really kind of disguise ourselves with those, because we're so afraid of being who we are. We're so afraid of others' opinions. We're so afraid of making someone else look bad. We're so afraid of what people will say about us. We're so afraid of being different. We're so afraid of not belonging that we cover ourselves with all this extra stuff, all these extra emotions, and yet still we're yearning to be our true selves. So yes, we attract things that we attract angry people, right? But they'll also too, if resentful people, if they see you're angry, they're gonna like, hey, let me add a little something to that. Maybe you can help me get back at these other people that have done this stuff to me. So we don't realize that how poisonous those weeds can be to us. There's some, I was reading, and I'm not there. There's something about weeds, they can be beneficial for um, for the ground, for the soil. But it's when they start their overgrowth. Get it? Overgrowth. They start moving into your garden and start spreading out. I remember the peppermint plant, and it just wouldn't stop growing. It was we planted some in Ohio at our condo, and it just kept sprouting out, and it would pop up over here. The vines were so strong, and how they were conquering the area because they wanted to be in that soil. They wanted our soil is so good, it's so fertile. And we come here as children, we're curious about life. We want to experience life. We want to experience joy. Sometimes, and when you think about all these things that we get into, these behaviors, it's that curiosity. And then we begin to blame ourselves because if I wasn't so curious, I wouldn't be in this trouble, right? When we think about all the things that can happen as children or have happened as children, even with strangers. It was a time where you really didn't talk a lot about stranger danger. Kids were curious. A guy would come, or a girl or lady would come and say, hey, here's some candy. That curiosity, that fertile ground that makes children want to go and experience life. We are here to experience life. And when we talk about that, even just that curiosity, there are people that are using their curiosity for the wrong reasons, right? And so we have to understand, what are those weeds out there? What are my emotions doing to me? How are they setting me up to experience an early harvest, raw fruit? How am I utilizing, and when I think about fruits, I think about our gifts, because in the world of spirit, it is character before purpose. That we are to ground ourselves in truths. We are to ground ourselves in virtues, because as we experience life, as we unfold, there are people that will come and want to experience what you have. and they may not be in the right frame of mind. They may not have the aligned heart. They may not be spiritually aligned. They may have growth stages they have not yet gone through or have resisted going through. And so we have to be careful about not so much, yes, of what we're growing in our garden and what we could potentially attract, but also to those that are looking to seek to spread their weeds, to spread their to overtake your garden, if you will. Um, and that's where we start thinking about, thinking for yourself, and we start thinking about, okay, daily I need to sit down and I need to find that quiet time. And often we think, well, if I can't meditate for 30 minutes, if I can't sit quietly for 30 minutes, then I'm not going to sit at all. Even something, just thinking about the ever presence, the omnipotent, the omni it's everywhere presence. You start thinking about it, it's like the words are not coming as they are, but the everywhere power, the all powerful, um you know that's there for us to guide us. When you start thinking about that, just even that presence, that acknowledgement, that we're thinking about, that even can call on this power and say, okay, what's going on? What do I need to to get rid of? What do I need to acknowledge? What do I need to let go? What do I need to seek more of? How do I need to go about my day? What thoughts do I need to get rid of? So we want to definitely um, spend time. And I always say that it's important to spend time um, dressing our mind and addressing our heart. There's so much about the mind, and the heart and the mind work together. The heart is that inner garden. It is the seat of our emotions and our feelings. It is where where seeds are planted, either by us or by they come in by others. Like, one time I was wondering why a plant was growing. I think it was, oh gosh, was it not watermelon, but it was a carrots. It was carrots, and I had a row of carrots, and next, I saw there was carrots popping up in other places. And my husband had shared that sometimes birds will pick up the seed and drop the seed. And every day there are seeds that are out there that are looking for fertile grounds. Thoughts want to be expressed, ideas, right? Beliefs. And so it's so important to really assess and say, what have I allowed in my garden to, what weeds, what growths have I allowed in my garden that are changing me? So we know that when we sit down, we can come into tune with this omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient power that knows everything that we will experience for that day, everything, and who we are and what we need to do. So it's so important to spend time, so important to spend time addressing our minds. What thoughts are you having? Using affirmations, positive affirmations, to help recondition our mind and our heart, plucking those weeds, those seeds out of us that are not there for our good. Because again, they're going to shape how we grow. They're going to shape if we become better or if we become bitter. And the heart and mind work together, because what we have in our heart, it feeds the rest of our bodies. And I think about the vine. The nervous system is the vine, and the brain is at the top of that vine, and it's getting what we put in the heart into our mind. And the thoughts that we have, the decisions that we make, all of that is being, can be masked, can be controlled by those emotions and thoughts that we allow in those weeds. And so I'm going to spend some time. At first, I was going to do national months, but I'm going to spend some time talking about these weeds that we're allowing. My son shared some information about something that recently happened, and how we think about murders, we think about killings, and we think about just attitudes and beliefs about cultures and people, and how it's so important that my mother, what she said is that nothing happens overnight. No garden, no seeds sprout overnight. There is a stage, there's a period of germination, this socialization that we often go through as children, and these thoughts that we carry that are not our own thoughts, and when we come into the world, that are not our thoughts of racism, thoughts of prejudice, thoughts of domination, thoughts of inferiority, superiority. Those are things that tend to grow in us. They're sown by other people, they grow in us, and then they take on different forms, whether it's just, murder, killing, suicide, all of those things that we experience in the world. None of it happened overnight. It's a process of stages. It's the culmination of independent thoughts, seeds, and weeds that feed into this collective worldly consciousness that we have, our fears. And through people, are these fears expressed in different ways, because we all have our different ways of growing up. We all have our different biological makeups, our human genetic makeups. We all have the same spiritual makeup, but it's the human genetic makeup, that expression of our gifts, expression of our fears, expression of spiritual truths, expression of we's negative emotions, consistent of negative emotion and thoughts that end up being what we see in the world: the wars, the shootings, the racism, the prejudice, the slander, all of that, murder, suicide, all of that we're seeing. And so it's so important that with awareness, the power of awareness that we have been given by our creator, the master garden, that once we become aware of stuff, we become aware of what we have, we can change it. We can change what we're growing. We can, with all this inner garden, we can use our energy in a better way. We can really surrender to nature. All of the topics I think about that's in my book. We know who we are. We envision our garden, our harvest. We are here to enjoy it. We pass on the information that we learn to to our future, so that they can have really divine spiritual gardens. And so instead of passing on negative um, weeds that end up producing bad fruit. You know about that. Good trees can only produce good fruit, whereas bad can produce bad fruit. And just being able to really enjoy and to produce the fruit that we are here to produce. So I'll be talking about that this coming January. I'm going to spend some time, talking about emotions and feelings. So I hope that you will listen to that and definitely provide feedback. It's not just about the good seeds that we plant, but it's also about those negative emotions that germinate within us, many of which we know and many of which we don't know. So addressing those hidden and those not so hidden emotions and feelings, and really living the life that we're supposed to live, an abundant life in all realms. No guilt, no pain, frustration, or lack of emotional pain, mental pain, not attracting diseases with us, taking care of our bodies, um, doing the things that we need to do to take care of us. And many of that will overlay as far as what I've talked about in Seeds of Planning. Some of that will be new things that I've expressed in this podcast too as well. So happy New Year to you. I didn't say that, and I just want this year to be true expression, abundant living, and really seeing the gifts that we have, and that's really some of the stuff that has fed being not people not realizing their gifts and being so caught up in pain and projecting pain on others. They say that pain can be your greatest teacher, because it lets you know that this is not the way it's supposed to be. There is another way. There's always another way. And often the other way is the thoughts, the perception of our thoughts, and the thoughts that we're carrying, and the beliefs that we're carrying, and how we're utilizing those, and forgetting the essence of who we are. So I'm gonna stop it right there. Stop, stop there. But I look forward to really, this was something that came to me today because again, I was actually going to have something else, and I look forward to really going over the weeds part of the seeds that we plant, those negative, consistent negative emotions that we allow to stay within us, and how they're being expressed in the world, the things that we see that really are bothersome often to many of us, but it's happening, and how we can take back our minds and our hearts and produce the harvest, that the spiritual harvest that we're here to produce. This is Timika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. Happy New Year to you, and I hope this year will be the year that you have the utmost conviction to live the abundant life in all areas that we are here to live. I'll talk to you soon.